Roan Calder drove his stallion straight at the flames chewing along his south fence. Smoke clawed at his eyes as he swung down, boots hitting scorched dirt hard enough to rattle his bones. Someone was out here with a torch, trying to burn his father's last boundary line off the face of the valley. He saw the small figure in a ragged coat, arm raised high, fire dripping from a kerosene-soaked rag toward his dry grass. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Drop it, Roan bellowed. His voice came out rough and big, bigger even than the wide spread of his shoulders. A sound that made colts shy and ranch hands straighten halfway across a yard. The figure jerked, startled, head snapping toward him as the burning rags slipped from their fingers. The fire dropped toward the brittle grass in a slow, bright arc. Roan didn't think. His body moved first. He lunged, long arms cutting the distance faster than his mind could catch up. Boot leather slid in ash. He hit the ground with his shoulder and snatched the flaming cloth barehanded, heat biting deep into his palm. With a low curse, he slammed it into the dirt and ground it under his hand until fire choked and died into greasy smoke. The stink of burned oil and singed skin rolled up into his face. Pain sang in his palm like a struck iron, but he shoved it down where he shoved most things that hurt. The only flames he cared about were the ones that still crawled hungrily along 3 of his fence posts, licking dry wood, reaching for wire. He shoved up to his feet in one motion and turned on the arsonist. It was a woman. She was small against the night and against him, swallowed by a gray coat 2 sizes too big, dark hair hacked into a rough knot that had half fallen loose, soot-streaked one cheekbone. Her eyes green, sharp, and wild-locked onto his like a cornered lynx. Her right hand slid toward her coat pocket. Roan's big hand closed around her wrist before she could reach whatever she was after. "Don't," he growled. Her fingers opened, spreading empty. No pistol, no knife, just bones and shaking. Behind him, the flames still worked at the fence, crackling softly as they chewed at the boards. His father had sunk into this land with his own hands. The south line had been Angus Calder's pride straight as a rifle barrel, tight as a drum. Roan heard his father's voice in his head, quiet and steady. A man who can to hold his fences and to hold his word. He kept his grip on the woman's wrist and jerked his chin toward the fire. "You got a problem with my word, miss?" She swallowed, throat bobbing, eyes darting past him toward the burning posts. "You need to put that out," she rasped. "I will," he said. "After I know your name." Her jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, he thought she might spit in his face. Then her shoulders slumped the tiniest bit, and the fight in her shifted still there, but turning inward. "Lena," she said. "Lena what?" A muscle jumped in her cheek. Wyeth. Roan rolled the name around in his mind. He didn't know it, not from any of the ranches or line camps. Not one of the Calder hands, certainly. Not a Dry Creek shopkeeper's daughter. A drifter, then. The valley had been filling with them, in the last few years men mostly, stringy and dangerous, willing to do anything for a handful of coin from Silas Rawlins. He released her wrist slowly. Her skin bore faint marks where his fingers had dug in. He didn't like that. He hadn't set out tonight, meaning to lay hands on anyone, least of all a woman. He'd just meant to check the fences like he did every few nights, riding the lines his father had left him, making sure the world beyond them hadn't crept in closer. "Miss Wyeth," he said, "are you going to stand there and watch my fence burn?" "I told you," she snapped, voice low and tight. "You need to put it out. Then we agree on something." He turned from her and shrugged out of his duster in one practiced motion. The leather creaked, heavy with years of rain and dust and sweat. He swung it like a whip, beating at the flames. Each strike sent sparks spitting into the dark. Heat washed his face, surged up his arms. The fire fought back, trying to climb, trying to leap. "Move," he barked over his shoulder. He didn't wait to see if she obeyed. He stepped in close, boots on the edge of fire, and drove the coat down hard, smothering the hungry tongues of orange. Wood popped, smoke thickened. His burned hand screamed each time he used it, but the sound stayed locked behind his teeth. 2 more heavy blows, and the last of the flames coughed out into smoke and glowing embers. The 3 worst posts blackened and sagged, but the fire hadn't had time to jump the gap and run wild. It would hurt to replace that stretch of fence. It would hurt worse to lose an entire pasture. Roan straightened slowly, chest heaving, duster hanging from one fist, now more soot than leather. He squinted through the haze back to Lena. She hadn't run. "Drop it," Roan bellowed. His voice came out rough and big, bigger even than the wide spread of his shoulders. A sound that made colts shy and ranch hands straighten halfway across a yard. The figure jerked, startled, head snapping toward him as the burning rags slipped from their fingers. The fire dropped toward the brittle grass in a slow, bright arc. Roan didn't think. His body moved first. He lunged, long arms cutting the distance faster than his mind could catch up. Boot leather slid in ash. He hit the ground with his shoulder and snatched the flaming cloth bare-handed, heat biting deep into his palm. With a low curse, he slammed it into the dirt and ground it under his hand until fire choked and died into greasy smoke. The stink of burned oil and singed skin rolled up into his face. Pain sang in his palm like a struck iron, but he shoved it down where he shoved most things that hurt. The only flames he cared about were the ones that still crawled hungrily along 3 of his fence posts, licking dry wood, reaching for wire. He shoved up to his feet in one motion and turned on the arsonist. It was a woman. She was small against the night and against him, swallowed by a gray coat 2 sizes too big, dark hair hacked into a rough knot that had half fallen loose, soot-streaked one cheekbone. Her eyes green, sharp, and wild-locked onto his like a cornered lynx. Her right hand slid toward her coat pocket. Roan's big hand closed around her wrist before she could reach whatever she was after. "Don't," he growled. Her fingers opened, spreading empty. No pistol, no knife, just bones and shaking. Behind him, the flames still worked at the fence, crackling softly as they chewed at the boards. His father had sunk into this land with his own hands. The south line had been Angus Calder's pride straight as a rifle barrel, tight as a drum. Roan heard his father's voice in his head, quiet and steady. A man who can to hold his fences and to hold his word. He kept his grip on the woman's wrist and jerked his chin toward the fire. "You got a problem with my word, miss?" She swallowed, throat bobbing, eyes darting past him toward the burning posts. "You need to put that out," she rasped. "I will," he said. "After I know your name." Her jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, he thought she might spit in his face. Then her shoulders slumped the tiniest bit, and the fight in her shifted still there, but turning inward. "Lena," she said. "Lena what?" A muscle jumped in her cheek. Wyeth. Roan rolled the name around in his mind. He didn't know it, not from any of the ranches or line camps. Not one of the Calder hands, certainly. Not a Dry Creek shopkeeper's daughter. A drifter, then. The valley had been filling with them, in the last few years men mostly, stringy and dangerous, willing to do anything for a handful of coin from Silas Rawlins. He released her wrist slowly. Her skin bore faint marks where his fingers had dug in. He didn't like that. He hadn't set out tonight, meaning to lay hands on anyone, least of all a woman. He'd just meant to check the fences like he did every few nights, riding the lines his father had left him, making sure the world beyond them hadn't crept in closer. "Miss Wyeth," he said, "are you going to stand there and watch my fence burn?" "I told you," she snapped, voice low and tight. "You need to put it out. Then we agree on something." He turned from her and shrugged out of his duster in one practiced motion. The leather creaked, heavy with years of rain and dust and sweat. He swung it like a whip, beating at the flames. Each strike sent sparks spitting into the dark. Heat washed his face, surged up his arms. The fire fought back, trying to climb, trying to leap. "Move," he barked over his shoulder. He didn't wait to see if she obeyed. He stepped in close, boots on the edge of fire, and drove the coat down hard, smothering the hungry tongues of orange. Wood popped, smoke thickened. His burned hand screamed each time he used it, but the sound stayed locked behind his teeth. 2 more heavy blows, and the last of the flames coughed out into smoke and glowing embers. The 3 worst posts blackened and sagged, but the fire hadn't had time to jump the gap and run wild. It would hurt to replace that stretch of fence. It would hurt worse to lose an entire pasture. Roan straightened slowly, chest heaving, duster hanging from one fist, now more soot than leather. He squinted through the haze back to Lena. It bothered him more than the fire did. A guilty man or woman ran. A hand hired to do a single dirty job usually had a horse ready in the shadows, a back trail planned. This one stood there with her shoulders squared, arms rigid at her sides, chest rising and falling too fast. "You planning on finishing the job?" he asked. Her mouth twisted. "If I wanted to finish it, you'd be picking wire out of your hide right now." His lip curled. "You're awful sure of your aim, considering you just about set yourself on fire, dropping that rag. I would have put it out, like you put this out?" He jerked his chin toward the charred posts. Lena's gaze flicked away from his, toward the yawning dark beyond the fence. The prairie rolled out there in waves of knee-high grass and sage, silvered under starlight. To most men, it looked empty. To Roan, it was crowded with memory, with tracks he could almost see, with the sense of eyes watching from ridges. He noticed where her eyes went. He always noticed. Reading cattle and reading people wasn't so different. Both told you what they were going to do before they did it, if you watched close enough. "Who sent you?" Roan asked. "No one. You walked out onto Calder land with a kerosene can and nothing in your pockets, and nobody sent you." He let dry skepticism flatten his voice. "Try again. I'm not one of his," she said. "One of whose?" He wanted to hear her say the name. Her jaw clenched. She stared stubbornly at the horizon. "You know, I'd rather not guess wrong when it comes to enemies." He took a step closer. Up close, he could see the fine tremor in her shoulders, the way her knuckles had gone white where her hands curled into fists. "Say it?" "Rawlins," she bit out. "Silas Rawlins." The name slid into the night like a knife. Roan felt something cold tighten behind his ribs. He'd expected it, but expectation didn't blunt the taste of it. Silas Rawlins owned the Diamond R spread east of the river, 3 times the acres and 5 times the money of any other outfit in the valley. He also owned most of the law, all of the fear, and far too many hungry men. "You working for him?" Roan asked. "No." The answer came fast, fierce, too fast to be a lie. "I'm running from him." "Funny way of running," Roan said, nodding toward the burned posts. "You're headed the wrong direction." The air shifted. Not the wind, just the feel. The fine hairs at the back of his neck lifted. Roan had learned to respect that, feeling the way he respected the first dark clouds on the horizon. It meant something was about to break. "Why this fence?" he asked quietly. "Why not the North Line? Or Odell's place? Or Keegan's?" Lena's shoulders hunched, a motion so small another man might have missed it. Roan didn't. "It had to be yours," she whispered. He said if the valley saw Calder's fences burn, everyone would remember that they could. Said your posts are the ones holding up every other man's courage. Knock one down, and the rest will lean. A tight, bitter smile tugged at Roan's mouth. "He thinks highly of me. He hates you," she said, lifting her gaze to his again. "And he's not wrong." Roan took that in without flinching. The weight of this valley had been on his shoulders ever since his father died in the north pasture with one hand still on his saddle horn. Folks had been looking to Roan for decisions since the day he was too young to want them. "And you figured you'd do his work?" he asked. "I figured I'd do what I had to keep my child alive." He opened his mouth to snap back something about choices, about never lighting another man's land as long as you had breath, but the word child snagged his attention. He watched the way she said it, the way it rounded her mouth, heavy with more than fear. "Your child," he repeated. Lena's eyes flicked again toward the grass beyond the fence. This time he heard it, a thin, muffled sound almost lost beneath the crackle of cooling embers and the distant lowing of unsettled cattle. A mewling, broken cry, barely more than breath. Roan went very still. The world shrank to that sound. He hadn't held a baby since his youngest sister Mara burned with fever 15 years ago, small body scorching his arms as he carried her from bed to porch to doctor's buggy, and none of it had mattered. He hadn't let himself think about that night in years, and he sure as hell wasn't thinking about it now. Except the sound in the grass was cutting straight through time and bone. Slowly, Roan turned his head toward the swale of wild grass outside his south fence. "Lena," he said, his voice gone low and dangerous. "What did you do?" Her breath hitched. "Don't go over there." He pivoted to face her squarely. "You left a baby out here?" "He's safer there than in Rawlins' hands," she snapped. "Please. Just leave her. The fire's out. I'll take her and be gone before. You hid a baby in dry grass while you walked up to my fence with a flaming rag." His words came out flat, each one more anvil than air. "You think I'm letting that stand?" He turned away before she could answer and strode to the fence. He stepped through the gap where the wire sagged and dropped into the shallow dip beyond, boots whispering through the stalks. The night pressed close, full of stars, wider than a man could ever hold. The crying came again, sharper now. He crouched, joints creaking a little, and swept the grass aside. A dark blanket lay there, folded in on itself, edges damp with ground dew. Something wriggled inside it. A small fist pushed free, fingers curling, and the cry rose in pitch like a tiny, outraged horn. Roan reached in with hands that had set bones, broke wild broncs, and hauled yearlings out of ravines. Suddenly, those hands felt clumsy as shovels. He slid one palm beneath the baby's head and neck, the other under its back and bottom, and lifted. The warmth of that small body hit him like a blow. Heat, life, weight, and yet hardly any weight at all. The baby's face was scrunched, cheeks flushed, mouth open on a wail that faltered as the blanket shifted and strange new arms closed around her. A girl, he realized, as the blanket fell back to show a round face and a shock of dark hair that glinted copper where faint firelight caught it. "Lord," he murmured, the word torn from somewhere deep and unused. Behind him, Lena hovered at the fence line, fingers gripping the top wire, so tight they must have cut into her skin. "Give her to me," she said hoarsely. In a minute, Roan stood slowly, cradling the baby against his broad chest. She fit there as if the space had been waiting for her, as if his body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. "You left your baby out here while you lit my fence," he said. 10 yards from open flame. "I couldn't risk it," Lena said. "If Rawlins' men saw me ride up with her, they'd know. They watch every arm I carry, every bundle I hold. Out here in the grass," her voice broke. "I thought it was the only place he couldn't see. So you gambled with her life instead of yours." "I gambled with both," she shot back. "But at least this way, if something went wrong, she had a chance." "Fire doesn't hunt. Fire doesn't have to hunt," he said quietly. "It just has to be close." The baby had gone from full-throated wail to hiccuping sobs, small mouth searching, little fists kneading at his shirt. Her eyes fluttered open for a second, dark and unfocused, and Roan felt it looked like a brand. Trust, wanting, need all turned up toward him, as if he were anything other than a stranger with burned hands and a blackened fence. "What's her name?" he asked. Lena hesitated. He saw the hesitation, saw the instinct to keep that piece of the child's soul curled tight away from this huge unknown man who ran his land like a kingdom. "Mercy," she said finally. "Her name is Mercy." Roan looked down at the baby again. Mercy. He wasn't sure if it fit, or if it was the cruelest joke he heard all year. "You set fire to my property, Lena Wyeth." He shifted the infant carefully, sliding her higher on his chest, one big palm cupping her back, feeling each tiny breath press against him. "That's usually a rope and sheriff matter. I know. Ordinarily, I'd haul you into Dry Creek. Let Sheriff Doolan decide whether to lock you up or ship you out. Ordinarily, I'd let the law sort out what to do with a baby who got caught in her mama as bad choices." Lena's knuckles whitened. "Is that how you see it?" Roan thought of Mara, of his father's slow, solid way of weighing right and wrong, of the valley's long, bitter memory of men who took what wasn't theirs because they could. He thought of Silas Rawlins, smiling as he watched other people bleed. He shifted Mercy again, awkward but doing his best to be gentle. The baby snuffled, tiny mouth bumping against his shirtfront, seeking. "Tonight isn't ordinary," he said. "Not when Rawlins' stink is on it." Her eyes flashed. "You think you know him?" "I know what he's done to this valley. You don't know what he's done to me. Then tell me." She looked away toward the darkness, as if she could see through the night back along the tracks she ridden from the Diamond R back to a big stone house and a chuck wagon and a man who never heard no. "You really want to stand out here and talk about all this while somebody might be watching?" Roan asked, voice going flinty. "Because if Rawlins sent you to burn my fence, he might have sent someone to make sure you did it." Lena flinched at that, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Roan did the same. The night seemed to thicken around them, as if shadows leaned in closer. He didn't see movement, didn't hear hooves, but his gut hummed with unease. "You armed?" he asked her. "No." She shook her head. "I sold the last pistol I had for food 2 towns back. His men look for the shine of metal whenever I pass." Roan believed that. Rawlins liked his toys, but he liked everyone else defenseless. "All right," Roan said. "We're done standing in the dark." He shifted Mercy firmly into the crook of one arm, grabbed the half-empty kerosene can with the other, and jerked his chin toward the fence. "Through here. Stay close." "You're taking us?" Lena asked. "I'm not leaving a woman and a baby as bait on my south line. You lit my fence, but you're not Rawlins. I've seen his kind. They don't shake like you do when they look at their own child. You don't know." "I know enough." He stepped through the sagging wire, careful not to jostle the baby, and mounted his big bay with the ease of long practice. Leather creaked. The horse shifted, calm under his hand. Roan held out his burned palm, grimacing as air touched blistering skin. "Up?" Lena stared at his hand as if it were a snake. "I can walk." "Then you can do it behind a horse full of Rawlins bullets," he said. "Or you can get on, and we ride fast with you tucked up where I can keep you alive." "Your choice." Her jaw clenched. She glanced once over her shoulder at the open land behind them. Roan watched the calculation cross her face. Pride against fear, habit of running against the small sleeping weight in his arms. She took his hand. He hauled her up behind him, feeling how little she weighed. She settled awkwardly at first, hands hovering, unsure where to hold. Finally, instinct overrode caution, and her arms slid around his waist. Her fingers gripped the fabric of his shirt with surprising strength. "Hold tight," he said. "If I have to move quick, I'd rather not pick you up off the ground after." She snorted, a small, humorless sound, and squeezed tighter. Roan nudged the stallion into a trot, then a ground-eating lope. The burned stretch of fence fell behind them, shrinking to a charred line in the dark. Above, the stars wheeled slow and patient, the same as they'd been when his grandfather first strung wire across this valley. The same as they'd be long after he was gone, if Rawlins didn't eat the place first. Lena's weight pressed against his back, light but making itself known with each stride. Mercy's warmth soaked through his shirt. He rode with one hand on the reins, the other supporting the baby, feeling every rise and fall of her small chest. It had been a long time since Roan Calder had carried anything this fragile. The Calder house rose out of the dark gradual as a tide, low and wide, logs weathered to a deep silver. No fancy gingerbread trim like Rawlins' big place. No stone columns. Just strong beams, a broad porch, and a roof that didn't leak because he climbed it himself when it did. Light glowed from the kitchen windows, warm and steady. Roan counted the silhouettes without thinking May Jessup's rounded shoulders moving at the stove, Hank Grady's taller frame passing by once as he crossed the room. Good. 2 people he trusted with his life, and anyone else's who had the sense to ask. He swung down in one fluid motion, landing easy despite the extra weight in his arms. Lena slid down after him, her boots hitting the packed yard dirt. She landed closer than she probably meant to, almost brushing his side before she stepped back. "Stay by me," Roan said quietly. "If any of Rawlins' men followed, they'll think twice seeing you near my door." "You think your name is that big?" she asked. "I think he knows I don't scare easy," Roan said. "That counts for something." He stepped up onto the porch and pushed the door open with his shoulder. The kitchen hit them like another world warmth, lamplight, the smell of beans and coffee gone cold, and a faint sweetness from the peach preserves May favored. Barn boots lined one wall. A stack of plates waited by the sink. The clock over the stove ticked steady, unbothered by the night. May Jessup looked up from the table where she was mending a shirt. Her gray hair was pulled into a bun that had given up staying neat hours ago. Deep lines fanned from the corners of her eyes, carved by years of sun and squinting at foolish men. Those eyes went straight to the baby in Roan's arms. "Roan Angus Calder," May said slowly, setting the shirt aside. "What in heaven's name have you dragged in?" "A fire," he said, "and the woman holding the match." "And her baby," Lena straightened. "I'm not just the woman holding the match." "No," May said, getting to her feet. "You're also the fool who thought a baby belonged in the grass at night." Lena flinched a little at that, but lifted her chin. It was the only place he wouldn't look. "Who?" May demanded. "Rawlins," Roan answered. "Who else sends people to burn what isn't his?" May's mouth thinned. "I knew it. That man's been sniffing around this valley like a coyote near a lambing pen. Sit." She pointed at a chair. "Both of you. That child's got the look of hungry about her, and so do you." Roan hesitated only long enough to make sure Hank had heard them. He had. The foreman's boots appeared in the doorway from the hall, followed by the lean, weathered man himself. Hank Grady tipped his hat back, eyeing the trio. "Evening, boss. You're late." "Fence trouble?" "You could say that," Roan replied. "South line?" "Somebody tried to turn it into kindling." Hank's gaze slid to Lena, took in the soot on her face, the worn coat, the way her hands hovered close to the baby without quite touching. "That somebody?" "She's the one who lit it," Roan said. "But not of her own bright idea." Hank grunted. "Rawlins." It wasn't a question. Around here, it rarely was. Roan eased into a chair, carefully lowering Mercy into May's waiting arms. The baby protested with a weak cry at being shifted, but settled quickly when May tucked her close, the older woman's hands already moving with the surety of long practice. "How old is she?" May asked. 4 months, Lena said. May clicked her tongue. 4 months, and left in the grass like a rabbit. "Lord save us." "He might," Lena said hoarsely. "Men won't." Roan watched the way her eyes clung to her child, tracking every movement. Guilt lay heavy under the fear, but something else to a hard, stubborn line at the mouth. The same iron he'd seen in his mother's face when the bankmen came out after his father's funeral. "Tell them," Roan said quietly. "Hank, May, they need to know what's riding up against us." Lena's gaze snapped to his. "And what if knowing gets them killed?" "They'll be in it whether they know or not," Roan said. "Better they see the storm before it hits." Hank pulled out a chair and sat, forearms on the table. "We know Rawlins wants our land," he said. "We know he's been buying up every stray acre east of the river, and we know he's got the sheriff half in his pocket. What we don't know is why he's sending a woman with a baby to burn our fence. That part I'm hoping you'll explain, Miss Wyeth." Lena's shoulders tensed at the miss, as if the courtesy didn't sit well on her. It was the sort of name Rawlins would give with a smirk, but Hank meant it plain. She stared down at her hands for a long moment, fingers knotting together. When she finally spoke, her voice had gone flat, scraped out. "I came out from Abilene 2 years ago," she said. "Work was thin. Rawlins was hiring at the Diamond our cook help, laundry, whatever needed doing. He liked that I didn't simper. Sighed I was good with a knife." Her mouth twisted. "I thought he meant the kitchen." May's jaw tightened. "The first month, it was work," Lena went on. "Hard, but honest enough. Long days, hot stoves, men who thought their hands came attached to my waist. I could handle that. I told them if they wanted to keep eating with all their fingers, they'd keep them off me. Then one evening, Rawlins came down to the cook tent himself. The memory flickered in her eyes like a bad reflection. No reason for it. He doesn't talk to help unless he wants something. He cornered me between the stove and the chuck wagon boards. Said a man like him wasn't used to being told no." Silence thickened in the room. Hank's hands curled into fists on the table. May's fingers gentled on the baby's back, the only softness in her rigid frame. "I told him no anyway," Lena said. "He laughed. Like it was a game. Then he took what he wanted Phil." She swallowed. "Finished his game, I guess you'd say, and told me I should be grateful. Sighed plenty of girls would kill for a chance to catch his. I." Roan's knuckles whitened around the tin cup he'd been loosely holding. Coffee sloshed over his fingers, hot and unnoticed. "I left that night," Lena continued. "Packed what I had and walked. Thought I was done with him. Turns out men like Rawlins don't let go easy. Started noticing riders too close behind me. Faces from the Diamond R showing up in whatever town I passed through. I'd get settled somewhere washing at a boarding house, cooking in a saloon. Then a stranger would come asking questions." She glanced at Mercy. Awe and terror tangled on her face. "By then, I knew," she said softly, "about her. Didn't know what I'd do, but I knew I wasn't going back there. Not even if it meant starving. That child his?" Hank asked, blunt as a hammer. Lena flinched. "Blood doesn't always ask who it belongs to," she said. "But yes, she's got his temper. You should hear her when she's hungry." Her smile was brief and bitter. "I'm not fool enough to think Rawlins would claim her out of love. But pride? Pride in ownership? That he'll claim." Roan stared at the baby in May's arms. Silas Rawlins' child, curled up in his kitchen, breathing Calder air. "How'd he find out?" he asked. "Word travels," Lena said. "Women talk. Men listen when they shouldn't. I kept moving, but somehow he was always a step behind. In Dry Creek, 3 nights ago, one of his hands cornered me behind the livery. Said Rawlins had been looking forward to meeting his little girl. The skin at the back of Roan's neck prickled. He said I could come back to the Diamond R," Lena continued, voice shaking now. "Said Rawlins would raise her proper, which means mean and hard, like him, in exchange for my good behavior. Said if I refused, he had other ways to get what was his." Her eyes burned. "He made a point of telling me about a widow's cabin out near the north ridge that burned last month. Said funny thing, how the woman who had taken in a stray ended up with nothing but ashes. May swore under her breath. A word Roan hadn't heard from her since he was a boy. So you ran again, Roan said. I tried, she said, but he had men at every road out of town. Yesterday, one of them showed up at the rooming house where I was staying. Sag Rawlins had a new bargain. I light one fence, just one, and leave proof I'd done it, and he'd let me slip away. Said he just needed to show the valley that Calder wasn't untouchable. After that, he'd consider letting us disappear. Roan heard the unspoken part as clearly as if the man himself had said it. Or he'd take the baby and leave Lena with nothing. And you believed him, Hank said skeptically. I believed he'd burn down anyone who tried to hide us, Lena shot back. You think that widow's cabin was a story? I saw the smoke myself. I believed he'd use mercy to punish me. I believed anything I did that made him look twice in your direction, instead of mine bought us a few more days to run. Her voice frayed. I never meant to hurt your stock. I just meant to make enough smoke he'd think I'd done what he asked. And you thought hiding your baby 10 yards from fire was the best plan, May said, shaking her head. I thought, Lena broke off, choking on the words. I thought he doesn't watch the grass that closely. Roan sat back, the chair creaking under his weight. The kitchen felt smaller, crowded with more than furniture. Rawlins' shadow stretched long, from the diamond R to this table. Well, he said at last, you were right about one thing. What's that? Lena asked. He's not watching the grass that closely, Roan said. Because if he were, he'd have seen me picking up the one thing he wants most. Lena's eyes flashed wide. You don't understand. If he finds out she's here, then he finds out, Roan said. And he finds my rifles too. You think guns will stop him? I think a man like Rawlins only understands two things, what he can take and what he can't. Roan's voice hardened. So far, he's been real short on people telling him no. I've been doing it alone. Maybe it's time that changed. Hank snorted. Been saying that for years. Folks around here are tired of eating his scraps and paying his prices. Then they'll have a chance to show it, Roan said. But not tonight. He looked at Lena. She looked back, chin lifted, eyes huge but unblinking, one hand resting on the table as if she were bracing for a blow. You can stay here tonight, Roan said. You and Mercy. Roof over your heads. Warm bed, doors that lock. For a price? She asked sharply. He frowned. Not that kind of price. Her cheeks colored under the soot. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, May said bluntly. You meant just what you've been taught by hard men. But this isn't Rawlins' house. It's Calder's. Roan may be big and mean-looking, but he's decent. He's also dumb enough to drag trouble in off his own fence line. Roan shot her a look. May shrugged, unapologetic. What I want, Roan said slowly, is to see Rawlins stopped before he eats this valley alive. You've got pieces of that story we don't. You stay, you talk. You help me understand how his men move and think. In exchange, I keep you and your girl as safe as I can. As safe as you can, Lena repeated. You can't promise he won't get to her. No, Roan said. But I can promise he'll have to go through me to do it. Something flickered across her face at that disbelief, maybe, or a painful kind of hope. May stood abruptly. Enough talk for now. The child's fussing. She needs feeding and a clean wrap. You, she pointed a gnarled finger at Lena, come with me. I'll show you the back room. You can sleep there, at least until we figure out which way is up. Lena hovered, torn. Her gaze went to Roan, then back to Mercy. I'm not taking her out of your sight, May said, softer. You can hold her while I find something clean for her to wear. That did it. Lena followed, trailing a hand along the table as she passed, as if steadying herself against the sudden shift in her world. She paused by Roan's chair, meeting his eyes. "If he comes," she said quietly, "if Rawlins himself comes to your door." "Then I'll answer," Roan said simply. She swallowed, then turned away, disappearing with May and the baby into the short hallway. The kitchen settled into a different kind of quiet. Hank let out a long breath, pushing his hat back. "You realize what you just did?" he asked. Roan's mouth quirked. "Brought a baby into the house?" "Brought Rawlins' baby into the house," Hank said. "There's a difference big enough to ride a freight wagon through." Roan stared at the door where they'd disappeared. "I wasn't going to leave her in the grass," he said. "Not when I heard her crying." "I know," Hank said. "That's why I'm still here, boss. Because you're that kind of fool." Roan huffed a quiet laugh. "We'll need men on the porch tonight, and at the barn. If Rawlins sent her, he might have sent eyes to make sure she did as she was told." "I'll rattle the boys," Hank said, pushing to his feet. "Eli, Nate, both owe you their hides from the blizzard last winter. They'll sit a night watch." "Good." Roan stood, his joints creaking faintly. Barn chores and fence riding built a different kind of ache than saloon chairs and counting other men's money. He stretched his shoulders, feeling the pull where old scars crossed. "I'll take second watch," he added. "Wake me when the stars move past the chimney." Hank nodded and disappeared out the back door, his footsteps already heading for the bunkhouse. Left alone, Roan picked up the broken cup, wiped spilled coffee from the table, and stared at the dark streaks on his burned palm. Blisters had already begun to rise, angry and pale. He flexed his hand, testing the pain, then set the kettle back on the stove and stoked the coals. Their glow pulsed, red and steady. Up the hall, Lena's voice drifted back, a low murmur, soothing and fierce all at once. Mercy answered with soft grunts and sighs. The sound lodged under his sternum. Roan shook himself and stepped out into the yard. The night had deepened. Stars burned harder overhead. The spread lay quiet barn hulking dark. Corrals empty now that the remuda was turned out to night graze, the windmill creaking slow in the breeze. The smell of hay and horse and wood smoke wrapped around him. Hank and Eli were already on the porch, rifles within reach. Nate's silhouette moved near the barn, checking doors and shadows. "Anything?" Roan asked. "Quiet so far," Hank said. "Too quiet, if you ask me." Eli snorted. "You say that every night. And one of these nights I'll be right," Hank said. "And you'll owe me a bottle." Roan stepped down off the porch and walked to the edge of the yard, boots crunching lightly. He stopped by the big cottonwood that marked the start of the long slope down toward the south fence. From here, he could see the faint glow where embers still smoldered along the damaged stretch. Tomorrow, he'd have to haul out new posts, restring wire, walk the line with his hands, feeling for weakness. Tomorrow, he'd have to ride into town, look Sheriff Doolan in the eye, and decide how much of this to put in the man's hands. Tonight, he watched the dark. He let his eyes trace the ridges where Rawlins' men liked to ride, the old cattle paths, the dry creek beds that made good cover. He listened for distant hoofbeats, for the jangle of tack, for the muffled swear of a man who thought he was alone. He heard only the wind. That didn't soothe him. Finally, when the cold had worked its way through his jacket and into his shoulders, Roan went back inside. He stripped down to his shirt sleeves, set his gun on the small table beside his bed, and lay on top of the covers. Sleep took a while to find him. When it did, it came in fits, broken by every creak of the house. Once, Mercy cried out a thin, questioning sound. His body jerked toward the door before his mind woke enough to remember that May and Lena were there. The cry settled. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths. Sometime deep into night, he must have dozed properly at last. The crack that woke him was sharp enough to slice right through whatever dream he'd been chasing. Roan was on his feet before the sound finished echoing. His hand closed on the Colt without thinking. The second report came as his boots hit the floor. Gunfire. Hank's voice followed from the porch, loud and rough. Riders! Roan crossed the room in 3 strides and yanked the curtain back a sliver. Lanterns bobbed at the edge of the yard, throwing long shadows across the dirt. 6, maybe 7 riders, their horses shifting, nostrils flaring in the lantern light. Saddles creaked. Spurs chimed faintly. At the front sat a man Roan recognized at once broad-shouldered, hat pulled low, a posture that spoke of lazy cruelty. Clay Murdoch, Silas Rawlins' right hand and favorite enforcer. Calder. Clay called, voice oily and amused. We come to pay a friendly call. Roan's jaw clenched. They followed her, came a whisper at his back. He didn't startle, but it was a close thing. He turned his head enough to see Lena in the doorway, hair loose around her shoulders, eyes huge in the dim. Mercy was cradled against her chest, wrapped in May's clean blanket. Get back, he said quietly. Away from the windows. She be scared, Lena said, voice shaking. Hearing the shots. Then hold her tight. His gaze dropped to the baby, to the small face pressed into Lena's collarbone. You stay in the back room. May, too. May appeared behind Lena, lips pressed into a thin line. If those buzzards think they're setting foot in my kitchen, they're not, Roan said, because they're not getting off their horses. Clay's voice came again, lazy and loud. Calder, no need for all this skulking. We just come to collect property that strayed onto your place. Roan's hand tightened on the curtain. He knows, Lena whispered. Maybe he thinks he does, Roan said. Maybe he's fishing to see if you snap at the bait. Clay chuckled. Now I'm a patient man, he called. But Silas? Not so much. The name was drawn out, meant to land. He's mighty particular about what belongs to him. Land, cattle, people. A pause. Babies. A low sound came from Lena's throat. Roan turned fully to her. Take her to the back room, he said. Bar the door from inside. You can't go out there, Lena said, eyes wild. You don't know what he'll do. Clay, he doesn't care how many men he has to bury as long as Rawlins smiles when he's done. He's not taking you, Roan said, and was surprised at how simple the words felt. Something washed through her face, fear, anger, confusion, something like raw, painful hope. You can't promise that. No, he said. But I can promise he'll have to try real hard. Before she could answer, a third shot cracked the night. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. The first bullet slammed into the far wall, splintering wood inches above May's head. The second tore clean through the hat hanging by the door. The third hit the kitchen lamp square on. Glass, flame, and oil burst together, turning the center of the room into a sudden blossom of fire. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Fire leaped where the kitchen lamp had been, a hard white blossom in the middle of the room. Roan didn't think. Down. He barked. He was already moving as the word tore out of him. One arm hooked around Lena's waist, dragging her and the baby sideways. His other hand caught May's sleeve, yanking the older woman clear as burning oil sprayed across the table and floorboards. The tablecloth went up like dry grass. Flame ran along it in a bright, greedy line, licking toward the chairs and the curtain by the window. Mercy shrieked at the sudden heat and roar. Lena twisted, trying to shield her daughter with her own body, even as Roan muscled them toward the hallway. Back room, he snapped. Now, I'm not leaving. He met her eyes, letting her see everything raw and unmending inside him. You're holding a baby. You're not arguing with me while you're holding a baby. Go. May caught Lena's arm and shoved her toward the dark hallway with more strength than her age suggested. You heard him, girl. Move. Another shot cracked outside. Wood splintered in the doorframe, showering the stove with slivers. Roan grabbed a wool blanket off the nearest chair, swung it wide, and slammed it down over the flaming table. Heat bit through the fabric. Fire crawled under it, seeking air. He leaned his weight into it, grinding the smoldering cloth down until the blaze choked and shrank. The corner of the blanket ignited. He shifted grip, jaw clenched against the pane, searing his already burned palm, and smothered that too. "Boss!" Hank shouted from outside. "You still in one piece?" "So far," Roan called, eyes on the last licking flame. "Keep their damn heads down." The fire dropped to glowing embers. Smoke boiled up, thick and biting. Roan coughed once, hard, straightened, and shoved the ruined lamp base off the table with his boot. He crossed to the door in 3 strides and shouldered into the frame, keeping his body to the side as he peered out. Lanterns bobbed at the edge of the yard. 6 riders, maybe 7. Horses shifted, stamping, their breath fogging white in the cool dark. Clay Murdoch sat at the front, relaxed in the saddle, as if this were a social call instead of a siege. "Now that was unfriendly, Calder," Clay called, lazy. "We was just knocking. You fire into my kitchen. I don't send you cookies," Roan said. "You've had your say. Ride out." "Can't." Clay tipped his hat back, grin glinting. "Got business. Silas Rawlins sends his regards. Says you've got a couple of things belong to him." "You mean the woman whose body you boys think is a room in your boss's house," Roan said. "And the baby he wants like a new pair of boots." "I was wondering when you'd say it plain." Murmurs ran through the men behind Clay. Roan watched their faces. The faint shifts when he talked about women like possessions. Most hardened. 1 or 2 flickered, uneasy. Clay shrugged. "No need to get poetic. Rawlins wants what's his. You hand the girl and the brat over. We thank you kindly and go home. You don't." His smile sharpened. "Well, Silas says we're cleared to consider that open hostility. You rode up, set my fence on fire, and shot into my house," Roan said. "Hostility's been open a while." Clay chuckled. "You always were dramatic." His hand dropped toward his gun. "Last chance, Calder?" Roan didn't answer with words. He dropped back behind the doorframe and fired. The Colt bucked in his grip, the shot cracking across the yard. Clay jerked his horse sideways, Roan's bullet shattering the lantern hanging from the saddle of the man beside him. Fire and glass exploded, oil splashing across the horse's shoulder. The animal screamed, rearing. The rider grabbed for the reins, lost them, and tumbled. Another horse shied, colliding. Suddenly, the neat line of Rawlins' men was a tangle of panicked animals and flailing arms. Hank's rifle barked from the shadow of the water trough. The muzzle flashed brief and bright. One of Clay's riders yelped, clutching his leg. "Cover!" Roan shouted, already rolling along the porch frame. Eli's shotgun boomed from the far corner of the porch, scattering shot low across the yard. Men swore, yanking their mounts out of range. Gunfire flared from the dark beyond. Bullets chewed into porch posts, slammed into the wall behind Roan, sent chips of wood flying. He shoved breath out of his lungs, set his elbows on the porch rail, and started picking shots. He wasn't aiming to kill them all. He just wanted to make every man out there decide this job wasn't worth dying for. A shoulder silhouetted against lantern light. Roan squeezed the trigger. The man screamed, dropping his pistol. Another rider tried to circle toward the barn. Hank picked him off at the thigh. The horse spun, jostling the men nearest. "Fall back," someone shouted. "Hold your ground," Clay snarled. "He's one man." 3, Hank called cheerfully, and sent another shot whistling past Clay's hat. The yard filled with smoke and curses, and the thunder of hooves. Lanterns swung wildly. One smashed against a fence post, setting it briefly alight before sputtering out under a horse's frantic hooves. Roan sighted on Clay's gun hand, finger tightening. Then a stray bullet smashed into the post inches from his head, showering his hair with splinters. He dropped flat, rolled, and came up behind the water trough beside Hank. "You having fun yet?" Hank grunted. "Ask me when they're gone," Roan said. As if hearing him, Clay swore loud and vicious. "Fine," he shouted. "We'll let Silas handle you proper. Pull back." Relief and disappointment twisted together in Roan's chest. He wasn't finished with Clay, but killing him tonight would give Rawlins a martyr and an excuse. Horses wheeled, hooves pounding as the riders bolted for the lower gate. One fired a last panicked shot over his shoulder as he fled. It went wide, sparking off the pump handle. Then they were gone, swallowed by the dark, leaving only the stink of gunpowder and the distant bawling of spooked cattle. Roan waited, listening hard. No more hoofbeats, no man's voice. The night creaked around them, coming back to itself. "You let him go," Hank said quietly. "For now," Roan said. His heart was still pounding, but his hands were steady. "I want Rawlins to hear this from Clay's own mouth. Exactly how badly this went." Hank grunted, but he didn't argue. They slipped back into the house. The kitchen stank of smoke and spilled kerosene. Embers glowed faintly under the ruined blanket. May, red-faced and furious, was beating a smoldering patch of floor with a wet rag. Lena stood pressed to the wall by the hallway door, Mercy clamped against her chest. Her eyes went straight to Roan, skimming him head to toe as if she could count the holes. "You're all right," she breathed. "Mostly," he said. His burned hand throbbed in time with his pulse. He ignored it. "They're gone. For now," May muttered. "Snakes don't slither off for good once they've tasted chickens." Lena swallowed. "He won't stop," she whispered. "Rawlins. He'll send more. Worse. He'll burn you for this." Roan looked at the blackened floor, the shattered glass, the bullet hole in the doorframe. Then at the baby tucked under Lena's chin. "He already tried," he said. "Didn't take. That doesn't mean. It means I'm done waiting for him to knock," Roan cut in. "Up till now, I've told him no on my own. Let folks think it was just Calder against Rawlins. That ends tonight." Hank straightened. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking the valley's been crumbling about him for years," Roan said. "Half the ranchers owe him money. The other half owe him blood. They've just been too scared to say it loud." "You expect them to suddenly grow spines?" May asked. "I expect they might if someone stands up first and doesn't fall over," Roan said. He looked at Lena. "He crossed a line coming after you and Mercy this way. Folks might have stomached him grabbing land. They won't stomach him claiming a baby like a stray calf." Lena held his gaze. "You're going to drag my story through every barn in the valley," she said quietly. "I'm going to drag Rawlins' story," Roan said. "Yours already got dragged enough." Her mouth trembled, then firmed. "Good," she said. "I'm tired of carrying it alone." Roan didn't sleep. By dawn he was saddled, burned hand bandaged, jaw set. Hank rode on his right, Eli on his left. They cut through the thinning morning mist toward Dry Creek, hooves drumming a steady warning on the hard-packed road. Dry Creek looked the same as it always did, tilted sign over the livery, sagging awning on the hotel, the same old-timer on the bench outside the mercantile. But every head turned as Roan rode past. He tied off in front of the sheriff's office and pushed the door open without knocking. Sheriff Doolan looked up from his cluttered desk, eyes going from Roan's face to the bandaged hand to the hard set of his shoulders. "Morning," Doolan said slowly. "Guessing you're not here to share coffee. Clay Murdoch paid me a visit last night," Roan said. "With 6 men and guns." Doolan swore softly. "Anyone hurt?" "Not on my side," Roan said, "though some of Rawlins' boys will be chewing with fewer teeth." Doolan pushed his chair back, boots thumping to the floor. "Tell me." Roan did. Short and blunt fence fire, Lena, Mercy, Clay's offer, the gunfight in the yard. Doolan's mouth tightened with every sentence. When Roan finished, the sheriff rubbed a hand over his face, weariness carved deep. "I should have seen this coming," Doolan said. "Man like Rawlins keeps pushing. Eventually he hits something that doesn't move." "You saw it coming," Roan said. "You just hoped it'd hit somebody else." Doolan flinched like the words were physical. "You're not wrong," he admitted. "He pays half this town's wages, including mine some years. Easy to tell yourself there is only so much you can do when a man can buy your badge out from under you. Law's not something you rent," Roan said. "It's something you are. Or you're not." Doolan stared at a crack in the floorboards for a long moment. When he looked up again, his eyes had hardened. "You want me to arrest him," he said, "for sending men to your place, for what he did to that girl. I want you to act like what he did is wrong, whether he's got money or not," Roan said. "You arrest him today, he'll wriggle loose. He'll buy a judge, buy a jury, buy 10 new Clay Murdocks. But if you stand up with the valley watching, some of that stain comes off your badge." Doolan exhaled through his nose. "You're a stubborn son of a gun, Roan Calder." "So they tell me." The sheriff shifted in his chair. "I heard Rawlins is calling folk to his place tomorrow," he said. "Big meeting in his parlor. Talk of mutual interests and stability for the valley." "There it is," Roan said. "He's going to try to scare or charm the rest into line. Make what he did to Lena sound like a misunderstanding. What he did to the widow on the North Ridge sound like business." "You planning to go?" Doolan asked. "I'm planning to be there," Roan said. "But I don't aim to walk into his parlor alone. I want the valley standing behind me before I ever set foot on that hill." Doolan nodded slowly. "Odell's?" "Odell's," Roan agreed. "Big barn, neutral ground. Word spreads fast when his boys ride." The sheriff stood. His back straightened until he looked 10 years younger. "I'll ride with you," he said. "Not as Rawlins' man, as law. Whatever that's still worth." Roan looked at the badge on his chest, the dull shine of it. "It's worth whatever you decide it's worth," he said. By evening, Odell's big barn was crowded. Ranchers jammed the space between the stalls and the hay bales, hats in hand, dust still on their boots. Odell's 5 sons leaned against support posts like pillars. Mrs. Hensley stood near the back, arms folded, jaw set. Doolan's badge caught the lamplight near the front. Roan stepped up on an overturned crate so they could see more than his shoulders. "You all know why we're here," he said. "Silas Rawlins has been pushing this valley like it's his cattle drive for years, buying land out from under folks when they hit a dry season, burning out those who didn't bow fast enough. Last night, he sent men to my place to take a woman and her baby off my land at gunpoint." Low anger rippled through the crowd. "He says the baby is his," Roan went on. "Maybe she is by blood. She's not by right. He forced himself on the girl when she worked his kitchen. When she ran, he hunted her. When he thought she had his child, he decided that made both of them his property. That's not a man running a business. That's a man trying to own people." Teagan, a lean rancher from downriver, shifted uneasily. "You sure about this, Roan?" He called. "That's a mighty big accusation." "I wouldn't say it in front of half the valley if I wasn't sure," Roan said. "You think I'd stand here and lie about a woman being forced? Ask yourself what Rawlins has done to the folks who owed him money. You think he draws the line at their land?" Mrs. Hensley lifted her chin. "Farley's widow told me," she said. "Before the fire. Side Silas came round after her Henry died. Said he'd clear the debt if she was friendly. She slammed the door on him. House burned a month later. Sheriff called it an accident." Doolan's face tightened. "I called it what I could prove," he said. "Back then. I'm done pretending that's enough." He stepped up beside Roan. "Silas Rawlins isn't the law," he said. "I am. I've let him twist my arm for too long." His voice dropped Rough. No more. From here out, if he sends men to burn you out, or take what's yours, you come to me. It might not fix everything, but he won't get to say the sheriff's on his side. Murmurs shifted tone. Less fear, more heat. I'm not asking you to ride guns blazing on the Diamond R tonight, Roan said. I'm asking you to stop standing alone. Rawlins is counting on us staying quiet in our own corners. If he burns one barn and sees 10 of us on his ridge next morning, he'll think twice. If he reaches for one woman and the valley reaches back, he learns there's a line he doesn't cross. Odell grunted. My boys'll ride if you call, he said. You hauled our cattle out of that blizzard 3 winters back without sending a bill. I ain't forgotten. Keegan nodded slowly. He's been shaving us on prices for years, he said. Tell us we can take his number or drive twice as far. My girls walk past his house every time they go into town. I don't like knowing what's inside it. You call, I come. Others added their voices. Not all. Some men hung back, counting cost against fear. Roan didn't blame them. He just counted the ones who said yes, and felt something loosen in his chest. Tomorrow, Rawlins wants to stand in his fine parlor and tell you what the future of this valley ought to look like, Roan said. I aim to stand there too and tell him he doesn't get to draw that map alone. If he reaches for that child or the woman who bore her, I want him seeing your faces when he does. Odell's oldest son raised his hand. You going to bring the girl? Roan hesitated. That's her choice, he said. She's done enough hiding. If she wants to speak, I won't stop her. He went home knowing the road ahead had only gotten steeper. Take me, Lena said. Roan had barely finished telling her about Odell's barn before the words jumped out of her. He stood by the window, watching the sky pale over the far hills. Lena, he'll twist whatever you say, she cut in. He'll call me a liar, a whore. He'll say I seduced him, stole from him, ran off with his baby, like some story he can laugh about. If I'm not there to speak, he gets to write the whole thing. He'll try to break you in front of them, Roan said quietly. Men like him don't like being named. He already broke me, she said. Her voice didn't shake, but something in it made his chest hurt. Only difference now is I get to decide what the pieces say. He looked at Mercy. Asleep in the cradle May had dragged out of the attic, a Calder cradle, sanded smooth from a generation of fists. The baby's breathing was soft and even, lips making little sucking motions. Mercy stays here, Roan said. I know, Lena said. If he sees her, he'll try to use her. He always uses what people love. May snorted from the stove. You're not taking that child into Rawlins' house, she said. I'll sit on you first. I'll mind her. And if any of his dogs darken this door while you're gone, they'll meet my old shotgun. Roan believed it. He scrubbed a hand over his face. All right, he said slowly. You come. You stay at my side. If things go bad, you get behind me and you don't argue. Lena's mouth twitched. You give a lot of orders, Roan Calder. Somebody has to, he said. I'm the biggest target. May shook her head, muttering about fools and men. But when Lena went to her, May took her face between both rough hands and kissed her forehead. You come back, you hear? She said. Both of you. I ain't raising this baby alone. Lena swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. The Diamond R house sat on its hill like a stone crown. Flags snapped in the breeze. Lanterns burned even in daylight, a show of wealth. Roan rode up with Lena on the mare beside him, Doolan on his other side. Behind, Odell and Keegan and a handful of others, enough to be seen, not enough to look like an invading army. Rawlins' men watched from the veranda railings and the shade of the big oaks. Their hands rested near their guns, but none moved to stop Roan as he swung down and helped Lena dismount. You can still change your mind, he murmured. I changed it when I didn't go back to him, she said. This is just walking the path. Inside, the parlor gleamed polished wood, thick carpets, oil paintings of men in stiff collars. A long table glittered with bottles and cut glass. Rawlins stood by the fireplace, a picture of easy charm in a dark coat that probably cost more than May's whole kitchen. Roan, he drawled as they entered. Sheriff, neighbors, and Miss Wyeth. What a gathering. His pale eyes slid over Lena, slow as a hand. You clean up nicely, he said. Could have been mistress of all this. You just said please instead of no. Lena's fingers dug into the back of the chair in front of her. Roan saw the tremor, shifted closer until their shoulders almost touched. We're not here for your compliments, Roan said. We're here for truth. Rawlins laughed. Truth? He looked around at the gathered ranchers. Hear that, boys? Calder's brought us truth. Myself? I find truth tastes better when it's not sour. Doolan's badge flashed as he stepped forward. Silas Rawlins, he said, voice carrying. You sent men to Calderland 2 nights ago. You sent them armed. They fired into a house with unarmed people inside. That's attempted murder. Is it now? Rawlins said. I sent my men to collect a child and her guardian who had trespassed upon my property and stolen from me. Clay says Calder fired first. You came for a woman and a child, not cattle, Roan said. You don't own either. Rawlins sipped his drink, unmothered. Miss Wyeth worked for me, he said. I took an interest. She left in the night, helping herself to supplies. He turned his smile on Lena. You didn't have to steal, darlin'. I'd have given you whatever you wanted, if you'd just been obliging. Lena straightened. You cornered me against the chuck wagon lords, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but the room went quiet to hear it. You put your hand over my mouth and told me no one tells you no. You took what you wanted, and when I spat your name back at you, you laughed. Soft curses hissed from a couple of corners. Rawlins' smile cooled. You hear that? A poor girl with dust on her hem and nothing to her name, trying to claim I forced her. Men, you ever notice how stories grow when there's something to gain? What does she gain? Keegan called. From standing up in front of all of us and saying that? Rawlins shrugged. Sympathy, protection, maybe Roan's nice big house. Man's been alone too long. Might be lonely enough to take in any stray that shows up at his fence. Roan's jaw clenched. She gains the chance not to be hunted, he said. You sent riders after her from town to town. You burned the cabins of folks who gave her shelter. Don't pretend this is about charity. Mrs. Hensley, standing near the door with her husband, spoke up. Farley's widow told me what you said to her, she said. You offered to forgive her debt if she'd warm your bed. When she refused, her house burned. You going to call her a liar, too? Rawlins' gaze flicked to her, then back to Doolan. You really going to stand there and let them slander me in my own house? Doolan's hand rested on his gun. I'm standing here as the law, he said. Been a while since I remembered what that meant. Seems it's about time. Roan looked around the room. Faces watched Rawlins, some guarded, some openly hostile now. This valley's been bending under you for years, Roan said. Maybe you thought that meant it'd never straighten. But there's a limit, Rawlins. You hit it when you sent men with guns for a baby. Rawlins' nostrils flared. She's mine, he snapped. My blood. My name. You think I'll let some dirt-poor trail rat raise what belongs under my roof? She belongs where she's safe, Lena said. With people who don't look at her and see a mirror. Rawlins took a step forward, fury barely leashed. You ungrateful. Doolan's gun cleared leather. That's enough, he said. The room held its breath. Silas Rawlins, I'm placing you under arrest for the actions of your men on Calderland. You can come quiet and argue your case in court, or you can reach for that gun, and we see how many people you're willing to die in front of. Rawlins stared at him. For a heartbeat, Roan saw something like disbelief. Then Rawlins laughed, not with humor, but with bitter astonishment. "You?" he said. "Arrest me?" "I should have done it a long time ago," Doolan said. Rawlins' hand dropped toward his holster. Roan moved. His gun was out almost before Rawlins' fingers brushed leather. Odell's boys drew. Keegan drew. Half a dozen guns pointed at Rawlins in the same breath. "All it takes is one man," Roan said quietly, "to say no. The rest remember they've got mouths." Rawlins froze, eyes cutting from barrel to barrel. His own men shifted uneasily along the walls. Some looked at their boss. Some looked at the ranchers facing them and seemed to be doing hard math. "Silas," Clay Murdoch said from near the door. His voice had lost some swagger. "Not worth it." Rawlins didn't take his eyes off Roan. "You think this ends with me in a cell?" he asked. "You think you've fixed anything? Men like me don't stay down." "Maybe not," Roan said. "But maybe mercy grows up in a valley that remembers today." Rawlins' lip curled. "You willing to start a war over a woman you barely know and a child that I send to yours?" Roan thought of Lena's white-knuckled grip on his porch rail, the way her voice shook but didn't break as she told her story. He thought of Mercy's small weight in his arms, the way her fist had caught his shirt and held. "Yes," he said simply. Something flickered across Rawlins' face, something like confusion, then contempt. He lifted his hands, fingers spread. "Fine," he said. "Have your shell, Sheriff. Put me in your little cell. We'll see how long it holds." Doolan stepped forward, cuffs in hand. His fingers shook as he snapped metal around Rawlins' wrists, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Silas Rawlins," he said, loud enough for the room to hear, "you're under arrest." The words dropped like a stone into a still pond. Ripples spread through every face. Clay exhaled sharply. Roan saw something hard ease in the enforcer's shoulders. Rawlins shot him a look venomous enough to strip paint. "You're done," Rawlins hissed. "You know that? Every one of you. You've just set fire to your own futures." "Maybe," Roan said, "but at least we lit it ourselves." By the time Roan rode back into the Calder yard with Lena at his side, the sky was streaked red and gold. May burst out onto the porch, Mercy in her arms. "Well?" she demanded. "Rawlins is in a cell," Roan said. Doolan's standing in front of it, like a man who finally remembered his spine. May let out a breath that sounded halfway to a sob. "And the others?" "Odell's boys went home with their hands still attached," Roan said. "Keegan, too." Clay Murdoch looked like a man who might be thinking about a different kind of life. "And the valley?" she pressed. Roan looked toward the distant ridges. "Changed," he said. "Not all the way, not yet. But it's looking at itself different." Lena stepped up and took Mercy from May, burying her face in the baby's hair. Her shoulders shook once, then stilled. "You all right?" Roan asked softly. She lifted her head. Her eyes were red, but steady. "He's in a cell," she said. "I know he might wriggle out. I know he's got money and friends, and hate enough to carry him. But he heard no in front of everyone. He heard it from more than me." She looked at Roan. "I didn't think I'd live to see that." He felt something uncoil in his chest, a tightness he hadn't known was there since the first moment he saw the baby in the grass. "You will live," he said quietly. "You and Mercy both. As long as this land's mine to guard." Lena studied him for a breath. "You don't have to keep us," she said. "Now that he's, for the moment, contained, we can move on. Find somewhere he doesn't reach." Roan snorted. "You really think there is a place out there safer than under May's glare and my fences?" May swatted his arm, but she was smiling. Lena's mouth curved, faint and incredulous. "You'd have us stay?" "I rode this valley for 10 years, thinking I knew what my job was," Roan said. "Keep the fences up. Keep the herd sound. Keep Rawlins from swallowing my land. Turns out the Lord had one more line on that list. He nodded at Mercy. Make sure that little girl grows up knowing she belongs to herself. Silence settled, soft and full. Lena looked down at her daughter, and back at him. Then we'll stay, she said. At least until you get tired of waking up to a baby's cry. Been a long time since this house heard that sound, May said thickly. Feels like it's been holding its breath. Roan glanced at the blackened patch of floor, at the bullet scar in the doorframe. Marks of the night Rawlins pushed too far. Marks he'd never sand out. Let it breathe, then, he said. He stepped out onto the porch as the sun slipped behind the far ridge. The valley spread below, fences running straight and true, cattle grazing, smoke rising from scattered homesteads. Somewhere out there, men would still be afraid. Rawlins still had money. The cell might not hold forever. But tonight, Roan Calder stood on his porch with a woman and child under his roof. A sheriff in town who'd remembered what a badge meant, and neighbors who'd finally said out loud what they'd been swallowing for years. Whatever came next, they'd meet it standing. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.